Hello and welcome to the Blood and Pigment channel. We're here doing another nation review. I'm Joseph,
One guy.
And I'm Dan.
and today we're looking at the Native Americans in Blood and Plunder. The Native American nationality covers a wide range of geography in Blood and Plunder, from the mostly bow and arrow wielding tribes of South and Central America to the musket and tomahawk wielding tribes of North America. There are a lot of flavors and varieties for players playing the Native Americans in Blood and Plunder.
It has nothing to do with the fact that you wrote the book.
I also like to say that the Native Americans in Blood and Plunder are a full-fledged nationality rather than just a token effort to fill out, checkmark a box. They really feel like just as much of the faction as any of the European ones.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. They didn't come in the core book, but they really came into their own really quickly in No Peace Beyond the Line, and I really appreciated that, how they gave them a bunch of different factions to represent different areas and people groups, and they researched hard to get characters, leaders for them. It can be easy to lump them all together, and they aren't as well documented as the Europeans in this era, but I really appreciate how they're a real thing in this game.
Yeah, I do too. To the point where the Caribs and Darians play a lot different than the more generic South American tribes versus the Caribbean tribes, and then the North American and Florida factions are completely different again. Even in No Peace Beyond the Line, they had different rules, they had different stuff they did. It's really refreshing.
The game was kind of designed around the European factions, so to make the natives work historically, these units and factions usually have more rules. The natives tend to be a little rule heavy. You're going to have to understand the basics of the game pretty well, and then layer on some extras to get the full flavor and bring out the interesting and powerful abilities that the natives have. So I think they're kind of a hard one to start with, but I think they're a really rich and rewarding nation to play in Blood and Plunder. And they might be my favorite. I've done a lot of play on the various factions and helped. I got the opportunity to help design some of the factions for the Fire on the Frontier book, which we'll be looking at a little bit today, and I really enjoy it.
To start with, I think the biggest difference that you kind of touched on is the Native American nationality is the only nationality that has rules attached to playing the nationality.
That's true. There's a set of 3-4 rules, limits you, mostly just limits. Like, you can't take cannons, you can't take big ships. If you're an attacker, you get to lay in wait. That's a very powerful rule in some scenarios. That's a lot.
Yeah.
You get to use paddles. You get to basically push your boats around without devoting your men to the sweeps, which is kind of cool.
Although from testing, if you're going to be relying on paddles, you're going to be left in the dust.
If it's a race, yes, paddles not going to win a race.
And then Fire on the Frontier added even more rules to the nationality ones if you're playing one of the North American native nationalities.
Yeah, they have a new ability where they can hit the decks. Basically, if they get shot at, they can just fall flat and take advantage of cover, which is kind of a good thing and a bad thing. Being prone in this game is pretty bad, but being prone is better than getting killed. So represents their dislike of bullets getting thrown at them.
Yeah, they also get the disadvantage of poorly equipped on everybody, but they get the war cry special ability that gives the opponent an extra resolve or fatigue dice on a charge.
Terrifying charges, yes. Nobody likes getting charged by natives with clubs and tomahawks.
It hurts a lot.
Yeah, it does. They are very good at charging. Overall, I think the native flavor is limited or less than great musketry because they just didn't have the resources. And then very deadly charges. And then their biggest strength, one of their big strengths, especially for the Caribbean stuff, is control of the board through lots of arrows. If you just fatigue everyone out, make them scared, throw pointed sticks at them, and then you can kind of control the board and charge them when the time is right. And I find that a very fun and interesting way of playing the game. It can be pretty brutal at times, but it feels quite different than your French or Spanish factions.
Yeah, you can play with the Native Americans like that and kind of just surprise your opponent. If you've never, as a Blood and Plunder player, if you've never played against Native Americans, then like you'll be in for a rude awakening the first or sometimes even the second time you play against them, seeing what they can do.
Or the third, or the fourth.
Should we take a minute and mention at least all the various factions? Quite a few factions of Native Americans now, especially since the Fire on the Frontier came out that has a large focus on natives. Do you want to? Should we check out the Central and South American tribes, then the North Americans?
Yeah, let me list them, and then you can do the North American ones. So to start with, the first Central or South American native group is the Caribs. This is a kind of a versatile faction that is their rules are included in the box that you get when you buy the Native American starter. And they're from Kalingo, and they get poison arrows, which is a central strategy of all of the Central and South American ones. But they have the death knell of the faction is Sound of Thunder, which I've had very poor results with. After the Caribs, there's the Darien, which is another kind of known faction. They're kind of fun where you get to play with thrown weapons, and because it forces everybody to have thrown weapons, and they also get hard chargers on everybody. So you get to really like experience some warriors with bows, and hard chargers. They don't get a lot of unit variety though.
That is another feature of the whole native factions. They have less variety in units than most of the Europeans, but they have more rules layered on top of them to make them unique.
Yeah. Yeah. Classically, in the No Peace Beyond the Line, they had 4 miniature lines. You had the Young Warriors, Warrior Archers, and Warrior Musketeers. And a lot of the factions will also give you African Warriors as a kind of support unit. But moving on, the legendary faction that the Native Americans get from No Peace Beyond the Line is the Golden Island tribe.
This was kind of a powered up Darien, really. It's very similar, but you get Golden Cap, and there's one other special ability, isn't there? Oh, you get Filibusters and Freebooters as support. That's pretty nice. And they get the tough and hard chargers. That's good. Really good for natives to get tough. Actually, the Filibusters and Freebooters don't get tough. It's only Native American units gain tough and hard chargers.
Yeah, just
That would be good.
just like your freebooters don't get thrown weapons either.
Yep.
They do in another faction that we're going to go over a little bit. You can give your English, I think, thrown weapons, which is kind of fun. So after that, there's the Caribbean tribes. This one is a lot like Caribs, and it's supposed to represent the Caribbean, the other people of the Caribbean that were not Caribs. Again, Caribs is a specific people. Caribbean tribes, though, play a lot like Caribs. They have the poison arrows, and they have that ability, Sound of Thunder, which I try staying away from. So Sound of Thunder means that if you are ever the target of a musket attack, when you make your resolve check, you have to roll an additional dice. That's it.
It's bad, though, because most of the native units have a less than average resolve. They like to fight, but they don't like to fight if they're losing, and they don't like to get hurt. So most of them have a 6 resolve. It's a rare unit that has 5.
It's only young warriors that have 5.
And one of the later North American units as well.
Yes. Well, in Young Braves, Young Warriors, and Neosis.
Yep.
Yeah, so you are usually with a resolve of 6. It means that 50% of the time you're taking, when you roll fatigue dice or resolve check, you're going to take a fatigue, which means Sound of Thunder means every time you're shot at, even if you make all your saves, you're getting a fatigue.
Right.
I've played it, I've tried it out, and usually, like, I've had my command unit almost paralyzed the whole game because my opponent focused on them and just racked up lots and lots of fatigue on them. Every time I took it off, it's like, well, here's 3 more.
Yeah, you lose one model, you have to take 3 resolve checks.
Yeah,
You use 2 models, you're taking 4 resolve checks, and with an average resolve of 6, that's 2 fatigue every time you lose a couple models. That is tough.
it is. It is.
But these are good factions to play if you're playing against a newer player who doesn't really know how natives work, and you might maul them if you play a really powerful native faction. But if you want to be a little more gentle, you can give them an advantage. But this is a real Achilles heel of these.
Caribs and Caribbean tribes. Yeah.
Yeah.
The last of the Southern American factions is kind of the consensus of the best of the South American factions, which are South American tribes. This one is more rules light than a lot of the other ones because you only get elusive on everybody and poison arrows. So a lot of the other ones will give you 2 abilities, whereas this only gives you elusive. But elusive is great. We all know how it works. And giving poison arrows to everybody is also great. It also has the deepest kind of model variety because you get all 4 of the different Native American models that are open to you. 3 of them are, or 2 of them are on your support list. But this is the one that Joseph has played a lot against me, and I've dipped into it as well just because it's so versatile.
It can dump out fatigue like nobody's business. All the poison arrows makes, and when you shoot somebody, they have to re-roll one of those successful resolve or fatigue dice, which usually means you're getting a fatigue for sure if you get shot at all. And if you kill somebody, yeah, it's kind of like reverse Sound of Thunder, but it works a little different. But since you don't have to reload, you can just shoot these poison arrows so many times, and you can just scare a whole force pretty badly by turn 2 if you really manage your force well.
And especially with your commander active, if they have 2 command points and they're in a bow-armed unit themselves, you can just dump arrows on their turn, and kind of like what you were mentioning earlier, where you control where everything is on the field and set up a charge by making somebody go prone instead of retreating. And there's a lot that poison arrows does they in this faction and in South America completely.
And we did a whole video review on these guys. You can check out. I'm going to get bogged down talking about these guys because I love them so much. So.
I know. We need to go to the North American variety.
All right, the North American tribes selection is a little complex at this point because we have no Peace Beyond the Line. They have a good 5 options in there, and then Fire on the Frontier. They have some new factions plus some updated lists of the factions from No Peace Beyond the Line. So we have 2 versions of Iroquois and Wabanaki and Westo. So it's a little complex, but they retain some of the same flavor, just updated a little bit as we move into the late 17th century. So first we got the Iroquois in No Peace Beyond the Line. They rely on their musket unit, but the musket unit's pretty slow at reloading, so it's not very good. They're really cheap, pretty cheap, but their musketry isn't that good. They get this war cry and cunning. Cunning is if you get shaken, you can retreat further than usual, which means you can't be chased, or the enemy can't follow up, and then you get to take a resolve check and possibly become unshaken, which is really good. The Fire on the Frontier retains those rules and also gives them battle hardened because of all the conflict they were in over that entire 17th century. And they get a bunch of new units instead of the Warrior Musketeers, which are really slow at reloading. They get the Braves and Niases, which are quicker at reloading. They cost a little bit more, but they're pretty good units. And the Fire on the Frontier gives them a named commander or 2, which is good too. And they get a Mohawk and Seneca subfaction, which gives a couple little extra tweaks. The Wabanaki are more of a French flavor. They are allied with the French in Canada. and Maine and New Hampshire up there. They get skirmishers, so they're a little more slippery. They can go forward and back easy. They rely on muskets too, and no peace beyond the line. And then in Fire on the Frontier, they get this Vanguard special rule, which means they get to do a free move before the beginning of the game, which is fun. They did infamous for long-range raids. They worked with the French a lot. There's a couple sub-factions in Fire on the Frontier too. There was like 5-6 different tribes all banded together there right in the mid to late 17th century. Fun group to study.
Yeah. The Wabanaki in Fire on the Frontier also is one of the only ones that can take size 2 ships.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, up in New England and into Canada, they took a lot of ships, and they actually had a couple little fleets of sloops and even maybe brigantines that they were sailing around under, sometimes with French, sometimes by themselves. They weren't particularly great at it, but there was a fleet of real ships. Kind of weird. Got the generic northeastern woodland tribes and southeastern woodland tribes. There's so many little tribes, all their own distinct nation and their own flavor, but it's impossible to represent each one with their own faction. So these are kind of umbrella factions that you can use to cover some of the more obscure, smaller tribes. There's tribes that weren't involved as much. The southeastern is more focused on bows, has the rain of arrows rule where you can just dump arrows out and get lots of hits. And the northeastern tribes has this, they can use size 2 ships in Fire on the Frontier as well, and they have the spry rule, which is kind of a weird corner rule that doesn't get used very much. Also Warcry. Then there's the Westo. They're further south. They were kind of maybe an Iroquois-esque nation that was driven out of the north into the south, and they were pretty mean. They worked with the English a lot, captured a lot of slaves and sold them. They have the Ruthless rule. They're quite a good faction in No Peace Beyond the Line. Now, they're kind of a mysterious tribe. We don't have any named people from it. The English wiped them all out eventually after they weren't working with them very well anymore. So they're kind of interesting read about them, but there's not a lot of information. Fire on the Frontier gives them the new units plus that Ruthless rule, so they're actually quite an effective and easy faction to jump into if you want to try natives. And then last, we got the New England tribes, which is in Fire on the Frontier, which is perfect for the King Philip's War. We got the options for Mohegan and Wampanoag and Narragansett, which were some of the main tribes involved in that conflict. They have to do the thrown weapons too. Their favorite tactic was to shoot a volley and then rush in with their tomahawks and clubs and break heads, was the term they like to use. And they have the skirmishers rule as well. And they have the new units. They get Braves, Young Braves, and Niases available, and a bunch of fun commanders. And last, we got King Philip's Alliance, which is a legendary faction for King Philip, obviously from King Philip's War. And they get the elusive rule, and they're mostly consist of young braves. Most of the guys excited to go fight at this point in history were young and enthusiastic, or maybe / foolish, ready to fight at the drop of a hat. And they can use the distraction special rule, which is quite fun. A scenario rule where you distract the enemy. They have to go check out this distraction, which can really throw the first turn of the game and kind of make your opponent lose control. So that's kind of an intriguing option. All right, I said too much, it's taking too long, but I love these factions so much.
I actually like that distraction was put in there because we've played through it a couple times in doing the campaign, and it's a lot of fun because it forces your unit to move like full tilt towards the distraction.
So flavorful.
But you also, as the one that's setting the distraction, you have to have a unit over there doing the distraction. Yeah, but and it's a lot of fun. I'm glad that a faction is using it, and it's not relegated to the back of the core rulebook.
Yeah, there's some fun scenario rules in there that's hard to implement sometimes, so I'm glad to see it here. So that's an exhaustive list of all the factions. Dan, you've been playing against some natives recently. Do you want to tell us how it feels to play against them, and then Guy and I can talk about playing as the natives a little bit?
Sure, I can oblige. So, one, I'm going to shout out to my buddy Chris, who is our natives player. He single-handedly joined up and shook up the entire play group, because we used to, want to stay back and shoot while we're on land, or then close when we board. Well, now we have a very good natives player who started off playing the Darien, and he was very good at what he did. use fatigue to, shoot those arrows and then come in and bonk heads. And then somebody on here released another whole book with more ways for him to kill me.
Oh, excellent.
And now he's playing the Westo. So now he shoots me and then charges. And it's a really different play style. I lost my most recent game with him because I was too timid. I should have I should have moved, shot, then charged. I got point blank range my filibusters and shot, think you would break them. Did not kill as much as I wanted to, and was out of actions. And then I got charged, and it hurt a lot. And it then devolved into a full-on melee where we were just throwing units into this proverbial wood chipper to see who would come out on top.
Play natives are like this one crucial moment. Am I going to charge you? You're going to charge me. Who's going to have the fatigue at the right time? And then if you lose, you're going to get mashed. But if you can break them with their bad resolve number, you can drive them back pretty hard too.
It makes everybody play differently. We have a Spanish player, Martin, who has been pretty much not dominating, but he always brings the most units numerically. And he's already hard to beat because of the sheer numbers. Even he's had to start playing differently because he's got the worst version of the natives that are employed by the Spanish. So they're not as good as, their tribal counterparts. And Chris he knows how to play. He brings a laptop that's got all his rule down. This is what I'm doing when I'm charging. This is what happens if I don't charge. And it's just, he really has his faction down. Again, it makes us all play differently. We did a three-way C game, and after I was knocked prone by my Spanish player, he boarded my sloop, took out my command unit, cost me the game, then used my sloop to sail over to the Spanish sloop and then steal the Spanish sloop.
Oh no.
He got 2 sloops. In every game we play, we do the plunder where you got to flip it over. And our ongoing joke is he has the little keg from the ports of plunder. He says, "All right, this is Dan's commander's special reserve." And every time he runs off with it. It's great. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy playing with him. I'm not upset with him at all. I love him. I told him he's going to get a shout out in this episode anyway because he's my experience fighting the natives, and he's really good. The only person who's been able to beat him is the Portuguese guy who plays. I think he's playing the Portuguese Banateiros.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just because he's a really good war gamer and knows how to play. He's the only person who's been able to beat Chris 1v1, I believe.
Yeah, if a native player really digs into the rules, and it can be pretty intimidating and dangerous to fight against, and you have to kind of stick your units together so they can't get charged easily, manage your fatigue well, and just keep pushing them. But if they get you on the run, it's going to be a bloody mess.
Yeah, if you have an opportunity to charge, just do it. Because I made that mistake. That is the thing. They hit like a truck when they get close. Between the thrown weapons, war captains, war cry, between all of that, he's usually hitting on like 4s with rerolls. So it's almost better if they get within charging distance, but not quite there. Take the fatigue and just get in there and charge them first so they have less to hit you with.
Too. They're good at charging, but they want that quick strike and defeat them instantly. They don't want to stay in a melee very long. So if you hit them, that's good.
Yeah, I had filibusters, then freebooters, then capers that I just threw into this wood chipper, hoping to turn the tide. He killed all of them. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you.
Or 8.
Yeah, most Native American units, their fight save is 7 or 8, and so anytime, that's why they want to kill. If they want to kill everybody in a charge, because if they get hit back, then they're losing, somebody most of the time if they get hit. So
they need to be on the initiative. They don't want to get hit.
Yeah. Now I made the mistake of when going up against natives, always like dropping prone instead of retreating. I'm going to spoil a lot of native players, but if you get 3 fatigue against a native player, run away. Do not drop prone, because if you drop prone, the whole unit's dead. Like, no matter how far the opponent is away, that's like a that's like a dinner bell.
The Iroquois would do that. They would eat you.
Yes.
Polite dinner bell.
Yeah, the Native Americans have an advantage when it comes to movement. A lot of them have movement special rules. All of them have scouts. They can go through rough terrain with no penalty. Some of them have quick, which makes their charges really dangerous. A lot of them have skirmishers. Cunning also helps your movement. So they're super slippery and can do unexpected things. You got to know what faction you're fighting against and know what they can do and keep track of how many inches you are away from that unit of warriors with thrown weapons because it matters.
It does. And a lot of them to couple with that,
Not all of them,
a lot
yeah.
of them, I think all of them have hidden, which I think they all have hidden. Except for no, warriors have hidden. I think they all have hidden.
Oh, the new
Braves,
ones, yeah,
young
yeah.
Braves, and Niases have hidden. Yeah, all the new ones have hidden. Young warriors have hidden. Warriors have hidden. Warrior archers have hidden, and
Okay.
warrior musketeers all have hidden. The only one that doesn't is African warriors do not have hidden. So, and hidden as a special rule means that if you are further than a foot away, then you add 1 to your shoot score plus 1 penalty. And if it's a 11 or higher, while you're shooting them, if it's an 11 or higher, you can't take the shot. So,
Oh yeah.
especially if you're using a militia against a native group, you have to really close range,
That's
and then at
charging
that, so
range.
you have to
Yep.
be under a foot, and then that's the
So
dangerous
militia does
charging
bad
range.
against Indians, and that
Yeah.
is how it really went down too.
So
So that's good.
so
But got to be careful.
you do. Playing with them, they are a lot of fun, especially if you've played a lot of Blood and Plunder as the other
Moccasins,
kind of
excuse me.
European nations. Stepping into the shoes and playing a South American tribe, the moccasins, yeah. Stepping into the moccasins and playing a Native American tribe, you feel like so powerful. Everything has so many rules going on. Everything, all the shoot scores of everything is 6 or less for warrior archers, and you just get to have a lot of fun with it. I think there is a high skill ceiling, and there's, if you forget about a rule, that's kind of your fault. Like forgetting about hidden or forgetting about some of the other stuff that they have.
But you definitely have weaknesses too. We talked about the bad resolve. We talked about they have either slow reload, like 3 reloads after they shoot, or the poorly equipped rule later on the timeline where they get 3 reloads if they use a club to shoot. They also they don't have any really cheap units. They have no 3-point models. Everything is 4 or up. Also, they're quite weak at sea, or at least very different at sea. A lot of these factions really weren't seafaring people. They had canoes and large dugout piraguas, and they would fish a lot, but they didn't have large ships. They weren't necessarily fast. They didn't really use a lot of sail power. So how have you guys found the natives at sea?
I've only purposely done smaller games with them because at 100 points, at 150 points, or even 50 points, the disadvantage of only using boats isn't really a disadvantage. It's just different because if your opponent is getting a ship and adding cannons to it, which are, like, the canoe's weakness is cannons, then they're spending a lot of points on that counter for you, whereas you're just taking more men in a different canoe or a different longboat or a different or you're really kitting out your piragua at 100 points. So at 200 points then and or above, you start running into problems. But I haven't done a 200 point sea game with the Native Americans just because I like those smaller point sea battles more.
I've had mixed results. If I have to chase the enemy, it's always bad because the boats aren't fast. They can't go faster than 4 inches. The Piragua can if you're lucky. But using the paddles, they only go 3 inches, which means if the enemy wants to get away in their frigate, they're going to. And if they use their turn, they can go even faster. So if I'm chasing the enemy, it's just a mess. Um, or if I start getting rammed, I hate that too. If people start ramming my boats with their ships, it's horrible. All my guys just fall into the ocean and die for free. But I've had a couple dramatic games where I had 6 canoes, maybe 200 points, or I had just 6
Yeah.
canoes. The guy comes straight at me in a Corvette or something, and I just rain arrows down on him. By the time he gets close to me, he's all prone and fatigued. He can't steer a ship because he's all shaken, and I can just walk up the ladder and kill them all. That's happened a couple times too. So again, you have to know what you're getting into as the European player and
Yeah.
deal with that accordingly. But it's kind of a swingy situation at sea, I would say.
I'd also say that Native Americans have the advantage if you're the attacker in an amphibious scenario, because in that scenario, that type of scenario, your opponent isn't buying a ship at all, and then you'll find out that you will have to buy canoes or a piragua or longboats to put your guys in. But getting to like a free move
Yeah.
with a longbow every turn, and you just spend the whole time shooting arrows or shooting your musket and reloading, it really feels like cheating a little bit. You're always in cover, you're always moving, and yeah, you just get your free reloads. The special rules hidden turns off when you're in a boat, so you don't get the advantage of that. But you do once you get to shore and hop off, then those things become active. So I think I've had a lot of fun each game. I've played as the attacker with my Native Americans. I painted up a mostly warrior archer and young warrior force with only a little bit of warrior musketeers because I don't like them very much.
Yeah, it's a very different experience at sea. Dan, have you guys done any sea games with the natives yet?
Other than the one that went terribly, yeah, no. But if it wasn't, and I don't want to disparage anyone, if it wasn't a 3-way game, I would have played differently. I just honestly was so intense and focused on taking the Spanish sloop, being in my native element, I completely forgot about the natives and forgot how they can move pretty quick. And then I was prone, like, all right, that's good. Then I saw him get close and rolled a grapple. I went, oh no, my command unit's prone. Oh no. I do want to play a game where I want to get some more longboats, Mary Periagua, and I want to do like a longboat versus canoes sea game. I think that would be really fun to do.
Yeah, the longboats can use sail power, and the canoes can use paddles, and that would be fun.
But other than that, that's about it. I want to do more. I've been running a campaign, so I don't get to play as much as I'd like because I'm usually GMing. If we have an odd number of people, then I hop in. But I want to do more. I definitely want to get used to fighting the natives. It doesn't make me want to play natives. It makes me want to get good at learning the game. And I think that's the most important part.
It will sharpen your skill playing the natives.
And you learn what all of their special rules do when you're on the receiving end of them. Like I have so many nightmares about evade. I hate that ability so much. Even when my own guys have it, I just remember chasing Joseph
The painful
unit.
way, you never forget.
We were playing it wrong. Yeah. Evade's really good. Evade lets you, if you get charged, to take a fatigue to fall back instead of be charged.
Really, yeah.
And that hurts. I've charged the same unit I think 2 or 3 times in a turn. Completely just it ends up like that Benny Hill thing where you're just chasing somebody and you're not doing anything and it hurts so much. And then you've taken a point of fatigue to run forward and they evaded and then they get to activate and charge you, of course. You can evade and you're not in cover. Or it's I have to be on the lookout
Right.
for units
And
that have evade,
evade.
which are warrior musketeers and I think warrior archers. Yeah, those are the 2 evading units.
Warrior archers.
They have the hit the deck ability instead, which is a lot more kind
later units
than
Braves, young Braves, nice as
than evade. I think
the earlier contact too.
Evade is always good.
That's a double-edged sword there too. It can be a disadvantage. Well, we could talk about the natives for a long time. They're, I think, a really rich part of the game. It's kind of weird because they aren't very piratey in a pirate game necessarily, but
well, I have to disagree with you. I think the Native Americans are very piratey. In all of Captain Morgan, his allies were the native people in the area. With the Pacific Adventure, they had their crew, a large portion of their crew were Mosquito people. And so in the whole history of the Caribbean, the Native Americans are there, and it's pretty much it's their story that
Mhm.
the Blood and Plunder is, because it was their land, it's their empire that fell when the Spanish arrived. It was them who rebelled against the Spanish yoke of oppression, and I think they do have a great place in the game right now as with their factions, and a great story to tell too.
Yeah.
A tragic story, and this overarching story is told at their expense. But it is nice to have them in the game and have them be viable and a powerful force in the game too. Go buy some natives and play them. It's a lot of fun. For more Blood and Plunder articles praising the power of the natives, go over to bloodandpigment.com and check out what we have there. We have articles on ships and nations and factions and terrain and painting and battle reports featuring the natives massacring everyone. Go check it out there.
Check out the rest of our YouTube channel as well. We'll be aiming to put out a video every Monday. Subscribe and ring the ship's bell so you can stay notified of our uploads.
And as always, keep your dice ready and the wind at your back, Yarha.